Well, friend, how are you doing? How are you these days?
As I think as good as can be, I have to say I have been intentionally looking for all the little things that bring joy, and I've been doing that especially with my husband and the kids, and so I think that has been good. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no, that's super nice. And same here. I think I'm clinging more to my weekends and
yeah,
trying to really spend time with people and even with art and music and books. And I think just, trying to get that balance of, and it's not just for myself or for the people I care about. But I think that doing this work requires a level of care for one another, including ourselves, that will allow us to really, you know, uh, have the resources, the physical resources, mental resources, emotional resources. So I'm glad you're able to do that with your family.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I've thought about like where has solidarity actually shown up, right?
Yeah.
And where has it not? And for some reason my mind keeps to going back to in the past, how have people not shown up, right?
Mm.
Because I think it's what got us here. It's people having this perception of solidarity, or where a lot of it is very performative. And so I've been thinking a lot about not only what solidarity looks like, but what solidarity shouldn't look like. Because I really
Mm.
do believe if the house is burning, we need to be thinking more forward about how do we want to rebuild it? What do you rebuild? How do you rebuild it so that it's equitable, and we have equitable systems that are where everyone has access to democracy? Because while everyone may be experiencing this breakdown of democracy right now, there are people who've experienced it for a long time, for decades, right? So I wonder if you've thought about that, like in what ways have, and I do want to talk about like how, in what ways have people shown up, but in what ways people have not shown up, but it's been a little more performative.
It's definitely at the top of my mind in the racial justice, and it's so hard, right? Like especially in the racial justice space at this moment when um people's livelihoods are in danger, or people are losing funding, or people's lives are in danger, right? Like it's so hard to toe the line between showing up, not showing up, like, and navigating fear. I think I struggle in the narrative space, right? Like in the racial justice space, the first things to go were explicit commitments or explicit use of words around race, justice, equity, right? And that took decades to build on, right? Like to even be able to name structural racism as a reality for many people, and to be able to name power as a thing that shows up when it comes to race. Took a lot of work in the movement. And in this moment, I think the minute that resources were threatened or organizations were threatened, it moved so fast. How people people removed equity words in their websites, or people changed their statements, their directions. Like, I think it's a combination of not learning from the past and also not looking far enough into the future of what do we really lose and what do we really gain when we don't show up in solidarity in these ways, right? Like I think about, you know, back in 2020, right? Like 2016 even, right? Like when people we're experiencing similar things and we're really afraid to commit to equity in 2016. And the result of that was that organizations get attacked anyway, right? Like even though they've backed out from even though they erased, equity words, or rescinded their commitments, it's not, there's no guarantee, right? Like, and you get attacked anyway. And I think the longer term impact is that people lost the trust of their communities, right?
Mm,
Because when they needed them to show up, when they
Yeah.
needed organizations and movements to show up for them, they didn't because they were also afraid, right? Like, and I feel like that's even worse than losing funding in this moment, right? Like years from now,
Yeah.
we look back, right? Like, our organizations, our institutions might survive, but will our relationships survive? Will our
Yeah.
relationships with people that we said we wanted to work with, or that we were serving, or that we were committed to, will that survive? Because if it doesn't, then the institution is meaningless. The organizations that we work for are meaningless, right? And so I think about like how easy it is because of fear for us, including myself, to be short-sighted and really like just think about what we're losing in the moment, but really have to like push myself to think about actually like the loss of solidarity has deep
Mm.
implications for the work, and has bigger losses that we're putting at risk, right? And it's just, I think, how do we, really think beyond like 1 to 2 years and think farther than that, and think deeper than funding and institutions, and really think about people and relationships, beyond the resources that we're losing.
And I think it's interesting that you say that, because I think that brings me to like, what opportunities do we have from to learn from what's happening? And for me, that's where everything you're saying is where the opportunity lies. It's in that we need to be we need to reframe the narrative, and
Mm,
talk about and connect what has happened to all of our communities, right? And that those aren't separate things that caused the over surveillance of urban Muslim communities, the attacks on LGBTQ communities, the surveillance of Black Lives Matter movements, on and on. All of these things are not separate things that happen to us. They're all part of the same system, right? And I think if we can recreate that narrative to not silo our pain, and rather say there is a system that is meant to keep us all working separately and keep us siloed.
yeah,
And so it frames these things that our communities are experiencing as different things, but they're really all part of systemic racism, right?
yeah,
They're part of the system that was created to keep Black people out, and I would say Native people, but now impacting all of us. And so, how do we how do we rebuild that system and create this narrative that any community that is marginalized or underserved, including white rural communities, we're all
mm,
in the same boat. We're all in the same place, and we have been impacted by this same system. And so let's find ways to not tackle the smaller things by putting band-aids on them, but rather all of us work on changing the system that is not serving any of our communities, right? Any marginalized community, any minority community. And so I think that's where the real opportunity is in thinking about, what's the system that it's burning anyways. What's the system that we want to rebuild, right? It's going away anyways. So let's rebuild it in a way that it doesn't matter whether you like me or the language I speak or any of that. I have the right to access democracy as a person who is here in the U.S. and so does everyone else. And for me, that's true solidarity. Is whether you like someone or not, whether you are, like sitting in that discomfort of I don't know this culture and I'm not familiar with it. It doesn't even have to be not liking. It could just simply be I don't know the culture and I'm uncomfortable with it because of all of these images I've seen on TV about this community. But even with that, I'm going to say, it's not up to me who has access to democracy. Because I think if we had listened to that a long time ago, we would have seen that democracy was not accessible to all, right? There were people who were being surveilled. There were people who were being jailed without reason. There were people, I mean, you have Guantanamo Bay that's been there for how long and without due process, right? We have people, Black men who are incarcerated in huge numbers in the country, and yet no one asked the question of do they actually have access to democracy? And so I think this was already what is happening now to everyone was already happening to some. And if we had flagged that at the time that it was only happening to some, I don't think we'd be in this situation where it's happening to all. So, if anything, this is the opportunity to say, you know what, we allowed it, and now it's happening to everyone. So let's rebuild it where it's never going to, no one will ever lose access to democracy.
I really appreciate that. Like, I think you were naming at the beginning that, realizing that part of being in solidarity is realizing that the systems we are up against are all connected to each other. And I think, you know, I like the framing too that I've heard around shared fates, right? That ultimately all our fates, all our destinies, all our outcomes are tied to each other. And it's no coincidence that systems are connected to each other, that they prompt each other, that they reinforce each other. And I think with that's such a helpful way of viewing what we're up against, because it also says that our solutions, our interventions have to be connected, right? Like if
Yep.
what we're up against is tied together, tied to each other, then so must the way that we address it, right? So that it's not just like, okay, racial justice folks have to do this to fight against systemic racism, right? Like, or folks in the economic mobility space fighting poverty have to only do it this way, right? We actually have to tie all of our work together. And I think that's also, we were both in the solidarity collaborative. Like that feels like the gift of even being in that space, because I think a lot of us come from different sectors, different organizations, different institutions, and different issue areas, right? And I think just being in that space and being able to talk about what we're doing in the world, like I think help weave some of that analysis that you're saying for me around, like, okay, what is being done in Puerto Rico, what is being done in San Francisco, what's being done by lawyers, by artists, by you and I in different spaces feels very much connected, and that there's actually a lot of power in being able to be in space together, right? By being part of this collaborative and being able to like really build bridges across not just individuals but across organizations, and by doing so building bridges between the work that we're doing and the analysis of what are we trying to address and what we're trying to solve and what our interventions are, has truly been, I think, impactful in that way. I think about, when I even the project that I'm bringing in as part of the work, right? I think I came into the collaborative not sure yet, what to propose, but I think I came out of it. So the project that I'm working on is a narrative laboratory. It's a cohort of 16 organizations working together for a year to build solidarity narratives within their organizations. And they're multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, right? And a lot of it is inspired by the experience of, being in a space like the Solidarity Collaborative. Like our first narrative laboratory was focused on one issue area, which was great, right? Like it was focused on immigration, and we built a lot of from that. But I think the sort of the push to experiment and to try a collective, a cohort of people from across issue areas was partly inspired by even being in this collaborative. So I think the a lot has come out of the few months that we've been together, and to just be given the space to talk to each other in this way, even that in the space that we are. I think that's such a gift. Like I think when we work with funders, right? Like it's very it's very rare, like, to be given that space to actually just be to talk and to learn about each other as people. Like, when I came in, I'm like, "Oh, what's the project? What's the timeline?" And then no, you actually this is just a space to build those connections, and to Rima's point, like empathy takes a lot of time, and I feel like we were given that time, and I think that to me is the biggest gift of the collaborative of just being in the space.
solidarity is so at the center of a lot of what we're talking about, especially because we have been one of the communities that has kind of stood on our own for so long, right? And so this idea of solidarity is not only, out of, let's say, conviction, but more so out of necessity. And so being able to be in this space has allowed for actually hearing where people are in solidarity, and where they're coming from and how they got there. And I think that makes a huge difference, rather than just hearing, what people normally say when it comes to solidarity, like the statements they're putting out. Like, that's always a great signal of who is there, but it's a totally different perspective to actually be able to sit down and hear the pain that people have experienced to actually get to this place of solidarity. And so that to me has been invaluable, because I think it created a space where, even we all come with certain assumptions, right? We all consume the same media. And so it's been really great to have that experience. So.